Trisha Doyle was a good pilot and a good woman. She will forever be a part of the NASA family. We ask that everyone give her loved ones time to grieve in this moment of loss. Her tenacity...
We don't know what caused the crash, but we are fairly certain that they lost at least one cosmonaut.
I'm not trying to be some goddamn role model for women. I'm just a pilot.
No.
Hey guys, welcome back to my review series for All Mankind Season 1. Today I'll be discussing episode 4 entitled Prime Crew, but as always I will not be joined alone in this journey to make it through For All Mankind from the very beginning. I would like to welcome back my friend and your friend for everything space. I would like to welcome back Dan Decker.
Hey, Marcelo. Hey, thanks as always for having me on. Thanks to the viewers or listeners, as the case may be, for joining us yet again as we go on this journey through a reimagining of space history.
Awesome. So to get us started here, do you want to go through your summary for this episode?
Yeah, so just to remind everyone that For All Mankind is an alt history reimagining of the space race between the United States and the Soviet Union. The Soviets landed on the moon first, and the U.S. has been trying to catch up. We've gotten to the point where they then sent the first woman to the moon. And so we pick up after last episode's tragedy of a pilot, one of our astronaut candidates, died riding what they call the bedstead, which is a test vehicle for the lunar lander. And we pick up from there in this episode, as Marcelo noted, entitled Prime Crew, where NASA intensifies the efforts to prepare for the next lunar mission by focusing on training the newly introduced women astronauts. We follow Tracy Stevens and her fellow trainees as they undergo rigorous physical and mental challenges to prove they are capable as their male counterparts. Amidst the intense training, Tracy receives skepticism. Well, this is like last episode's. This episode's more about Molly and how she got picked for the Prime Crew over Gordo, which broke the deal that Deke made with Gordo to get Tracy to join the program, or to let Gordo get to let Tracy join the program. So no, this episode's all about Molly and how she has to face all of that and get accepted into this because she's been reassigned to Gordo's seat on Apollo 15. So there we go.
Yeah, the very interesting thing about this episode to me is like Dan just said, when in Nixon's Women, Gordo didn't really have a pushback to Tracy joining the astronaut program, and I'm going to bring it around, guys. And because he didn't have much of a pushback to Tracy joining the astronaut program is because, like Dan just said, Deke promised him a seat on 15. But I really think that Molly getting the seat on 15 over Gordo has a lot to do with the fact that our favorite NASA politician, Mr. Payne, came in early on in this episode and said to Deke that the president is no longer interested in women in space because he just made a peace agreement to end the war in Vietnam. So that's the nice shiny thing that he likes. That's a nice shiny thing that he wants to focus on, and he doesn't give a shit about women in space anymore. But because Deke put all the time and effort into training these women, and these women went through hell or high water to become astronauts. Deke doesn't feel that that's right to sort of just cut them off their knees and just throw them out like trash. And because be, because he wants to go against what Mr. Power said and what the president's wishes are, I think that's why he chose to put Molly in Gordo's seat, just to further fuck him over if Molly fucks up on the moon. So, what did you think about that decision from Deke in this episode?
So there's a lot going on with Deke because as it was in our history, he was grounded from ever being allowed to fly because he had atrial fibrillation, where your heart can go out of rhythm. It's not a great thing. And so, you can't have that happen while you're one of 3 people on the way to the moon. So it was safer for him not to fly. But he's in control. He's in charge of who flies and who doesn't. And that's the point of, you're right. That's the point of what he does, is to cement the fact that while he is in that position at NASA, he calls who goes and who don't. And he rearranged the roster to make a point. And also, he has that empathy because, as Molly points out later on, she is one of the Mercury 13. So, and again, mirroring actual history, there was a class of women astronauts before we had women in space as the United States. And so in this history, Molly was one of those. So she had theoretically already been through a chunk of astronaut training. So it's not a bad call necessarily. It just kind of, reassigned Gordo to a different mission down the road. We don't know about that yet, but we will later. But yeah, I think it had to do with proving who's in charge. That comes around at the end of the episode when he gets a phone call.
If I could move us back for just a few minutes, talking about the death of astronaut Patty in the lunar lander, the thing that almost killed Neil Armstrong. He fucking
Right.
crashed.
Right.
But you know what, I find the scene with Ed in his kitchen trying to talk to Patty's father and trying to give him his condolences. I find that scene very, very effective because Ed is trying to get a word in, and Patty's father is not letting him, and he hangs up on him, and Ed fucking whacks the phone out of the wall.
Right.
And I love the moment when Karen comes in and she goes, you know, parents usually in times of high stress and usually when parents are dealing with death, the last thing that they want to hear is condolences from the person that was supposed to be protecting them.
Sure. Yeah.
I found that really interesting, and here's why. Minor spoilers, because Karen's going to go through something pretty bad herself in just a few episodes from now.
Yep. Yeah. And there's
For sure.
foreshadowing for that. Big
Yeah,
time.
yeah, foreshadowing for that. It's just a really short scene that shows that Ed is it is a great scene that shows that Ed is an honorable person, and it shows that Ed has empathy, which is really interesting because not a lot of people, despite a few people, like all the heads at NASA, a lot of the heads really think that having women in space is just a publicity stunt, and
Right.
not too many people there, give or take a few, think that women belong there. And I'm really happy to see that Ed really, really takes his position at NASA seriously and takes what he should have done seriously. And I also like that when one of his pilots dies, he feels it because he was right. It was his fault that she wasn't ready. But then when Tracy, Danielle, and Ellen and Cobb are having drinks at the bar, Cobb says something very, very interesting. She says, it was nobody's fault. She fucked up. She
Yeah.
screwed the
She
pooch.
screwed the pooch. Yeah.
And I really, really like it how in that scene she sort of foresaw what Nixon and Powers were going to do by shutting down the program. So they used the accident as sort of like a scapegoat to shut down the program. Not to say, look, I'm not saying that they didn't want to shut down the program before, but I really think that this accident gave them another reason to shut down the program if they wanted to, which is something that they clearly wanted to do.
Like you said, they had a new shiny. They didn't have to follow through with this if they didn't want to, but there were already people doing their jobs like Ed and like Deke.
The other thing that I really found interesting about this program about this episode, sorry, in the last episode when when the women astronauts were studying and doing some classes with Margot, it was made clear that Molly understood the calculations and she understood the math. So much so that when Margot gave her a test, she aced the test.
Right.
But in this episode, I really like how the writers put the shoe on the other foot. So in last episode, we saw that Molly is a competent person and she knows the math. But in this episode, when she's doing all the training to actually do the mission to the moon, she's not focused. She's getting things wrong. And it's to the point when they're in the sim and Ed sees that Molly is fucking up and he goes, you know what? Fuck it. I'll do it.
Yeah.
And
we'll make a change to the procedure.
Yeah. And I love the moment when Margot meets Molly outside of the sim and she goes, what the fuck are you doing? And Molly thinks it's because she found out that Margot likes to do piano at a club late at night.
Right.
That's not what it's about. Margot is pissed off because Molly is fucking away her opportunity to be an astronaut. And Molly says something very, very interesting that you saw in our opening there, a brilliant video package put together by Dan himself.
Thank you very much.
She goes, I'm a pilot. I'm a pilot. I don't want to be a role model for women. And Margot says, you're much more than that. You're an astronaut.
Yep.
So I really like it how even Margot understands how important it is for Molly to be doing this. And after that conversation, Molly sort of sits her ass down and takes a bite of a humility sandwich and studies the fucking numbers.
Yep.
And eventually she she's put back in that position by Ed. We don't see it, but she is put back in that position by Ed. So what do you think of all that stuff?
That whole dynamic and it ties back to so Margot has that moment with Molly near the end of the episode, but if we go back to the meeting that they have where they suspect the Russians crashed a lander and they may be building a moon base, director Payne is very dismissive of Margot and her role, and our mega superhero Gene Krantz stands up for her and he says she's a flight guidance officer. And she knows her shit, basically. Because he tries to put her down. He's like, "Oh, you're Von Braun's girl," and that's when Gene stands up and says, "No, she's a flight guidance officer, and she knows this stuff inside and out." And so that comes back around. That moment kind of empowered her, I think, because again, like at the tail end of it, like you said. Molly is a bit suspicious. She's like, "Oh, you're angry that I know your secret and that I can hold it over you." And Margot's like, "No, don't throw this opportunity away." And she was empowered, like because she was called into who she was by Gene. You're a flight guidance officer, and so Margot's there to call Molly into who she is. You're a goddamn astronaut. And that's not for nothing because, she got the pin. Deke put the pin on her. And, by all accounts, she almost did it twice. So, yeah, that whole, and that plays out around several other scenes, but that whole dynamic where we see, Margot struggling to do some math and she sets her metronome and kind of gets into the groove, and then it fades into the club, and then we see that Molly and Wayne are there, that whole thing plays out real nice. I like it a lot.
I love the moment in the club. If I could just go back just a little bit, when Molly goes up to Margot, and you see Wayne there, and Molly is like, "Who's this?" And Molly goes, "This is my husband, Wayne."
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's really funny because Molly, look, I've said it. I've said it. Dennis said it. Molly's a bit of a bitch.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. She's
it's
a little
really
gruff,
surprising. Yeah, she's a little gruff. So it's really surprising to me that Molly would have a husband. And also, Molly doesn't seem like the chatty individual. She doesn't seem like she would chat it up at NASA and tell everybody, "Hey, I have a husband who
Right.
I smoke pot with."
Oh, definitely not
Um,
that part, right?
yeah, yeah, definitely not that part. But the other thing that I found out about this episode, and we've talked about it just a little bit in my comments and Dan's comments there. This episode really has an undercurrent of fucking really. I'm not gonna say racist, but really rigid men thinking women can't do shit correctly.
Oh yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Much
because
misogyny.
there's a moment with Larry and Ellen at the outpost where Larry's, I think he's gonna get, I think he's gonna play a song on a jukebox,
Yeah, he's at the
and
jukebox. Yeah.
yeah, he's at the jukebox, and a member from Mission Control thinks that Larry and Ellen are having a thing, so he's like, "You should really put a ring on that before
Someone
um,
else does. Yeah.
someone else does." But that's not what he says. He says something much worse.
Oh yeah. No, it's pretty
Um,
bad.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty bad. But I swear to God, the look on poor Larry's face, because I think this episode did a great job of sort of feeding out the character of Ellen Waverly, and to a lesser extent Larry, because because since we've known her, we've had no hints about whether she wants a family or whether she's going out with somebody. So this is the first episode that we see that. But what they do with it is very, very interesting, because they hint at it early on in that scene that I just mentioned. And a couple scenes later, we find out and we're like, oh shit, this is a problem because of the time we're in. If somebody finds out about this, which Dan will address in a second, uh, uh, Larry and Helen could lose everything.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
So, do you want to address what their big secret is, Dan?
Right. So we learn about uh, Ellen quite straightforward in the
Helen.
text, because she the way it goes down is the person who just assumed that Larry and Ellen were together at the outpost. Larry gets a call early in the morning and says, "Hey, Ellen needs to be at the base extra early for XYZ." And he's like, "Why are you calling me?" And he's like, "Well, there was no answer at her house. I just figured she was with you, wink, wink, nudge, nudge." And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, sure, sure. Yeah, I'll tell her you got it, man. We'll be there." And then immediately, rolls over, picks up the phone book. A phone book, children, is something that we used to have to use to look up telephone numbers of people that we didn't directly know. And there was a big book with everybody listed, and you could call them. So he calls, he looks up Pam, because he suspects that that's where Ellen is, kind of, the literal game of telephone. And so he calls over to Pam's house, and she's like, "Why are you calling me?" And he's like, "Really? Just tell her I'm on my way in 20 minutes." And then Ellen wakes up, and we see that directly. And as they are on their way to, to work, as it were, uh, Larry fills in Ellen. He's like, "Hey, look, this is the story that's going on right now, and if you play along, we can both manage to take care of this." And he's like, "Because I completely understand where you're coming from," and he clues her in that Larry is also gay. Ellen is gay, Larry is gay, and they can pretend to have a relationship together to the benefit of both of them, because as Marcelo points out, that the time period that this takes place is 1970, and being openly out at NASA would not literally not fly. So they have to be very careful. and that plays out through the rest of the show down the road. We'll have a really good several story beats around Larry and Ellen's relationship. So it's a great way to introduce us to that without being ham-fisted about it. I mean, it's really very organic because I don't remember. I don't remember when I originally watched this if I caught up on any of that, like just from because they're not really telling, but they're not saying either. So it's kind of I was trying to challenge myself, and I couldn't remember if I saw it the first time until like Ellen's literally at Pam's house or not. But it's really well done. It's really well done.
In retrospect, like you, I can't remember if I caught on to it when I originally watched the show, but if you go back and watch the episodes featuring Ellen and Larry, their relationship is very, very, very on the surface. It's not they're together, but they have like this way about them that there's something that isn't right if you look at it.
Right.
And after seeing this episode, you're like, oh, this is why it doesn't feel right.
Yeah, because well, there's a connection. There's an obvious
Yes, yes,
kinship and
absolutely.
affection,
Yes,
just not a
absolutely.
romance.
Yeah, yeah, just like yeah.
And because that's not that doesn't jive between them. And that
And
I mean that whole thing. And two, how the bookend to this, which in a couple seasons from now, the
oh
bookend
yeah.
to this of Larry cautioning Ellen on behavior and exposure.
That's
That's another. I told my son today as I was watching along. I said, I don't know if it was that well planned or if they're just that good at going back and picking up beats. And either way, it doesn't matter because it's being well written. So
yeah.
it's incredibly well done.
Yeah, I mean, look, um for Larry to say for Larry to say something that specific in the car when they're driving to NASA, I'm going to give Ron and his writers all the credit in the world, but I personally don't think that they thought that far ahead. So I will just say that I think that's them just picking up an earlier story point and just using it to greater effect.
It's like I said, either way, it's excellent storytelling. That's how good writing gets done. And thankfully for the writers of shows like this, there is this visual record of the work they've done, so they can go back pretty easily
Yeah,
and see those beats.
and look
And
at everything. Yeah,
yeah, and two though, not to get too distracted by being that far down the road, but the way that comes up, it's so organic in
yep,
the narrative anyway that it could be neither of those things and just be the organic way the story folded. So either way,
yeah.
as a storyteller yourself, you can appreciate all of that from any angle.
Oh yes, you can. And if you think about it, just one more quick word on that before we move on. It's really, really ironic when we get there, what happens to
Hmm.
Larry.
Yep.
I mean, yeah, it's just really ironic. So, the next scene that I would like to talk about is a scene when is a scene when Ed is told that Molly is going to be replacing Gordo on 15. And Ed is basically told to take Molly out and to get to know her a little bit because she's going to be one of your pilots. You should get to know her a little bit. And Ed, along with the other astronaut, take her to the outpost. And Ed is sort of trying to welcome Molly into the team. He's sort of, explaining to her how it's going to go and all this and that. But here's the thing about it: the way that Ed is talking and the way that his partner is just eating over there, the whole scene is filled with like, we know more than you, so you should listen to us and shut the fuck up. And like it's just like it is so passive aggressive, but not trying to be passive aggressive. What do you think of that whole scene of the outpost with the three of them?
What gets us to the outpost is we start with Ed teaching Shane is his son's name,
Oh
right?
yes,
Yeah,
yes, Shane, yes.
teaching him to ride a bike, and this is all very important stuff. It doesn't seem important at the time, but I
Oh, it is.
promise you all it will be. So Ed is trying to teach his son to ride a bike, which is, trust me, it's a hard thing to do because, like, how do you? I mean, I've tried, and none of my kids can ride a bike. That's how hard it is. So, but uh, Ed is being Ed. He's easily frustrated because he has big feelings he doesn't know how to express. So he kind of comes down hard on him. He's like, rub some dirt in it. You get up and you try again, and we don't quit. And he's really pressing. And like Shane starts to cry. He's like, no, we don't have any of that. You get back on and you go. And he's still trying to teeter down the driveway, and Deke pulls in, and that's for the conversation to tell Ed that Gordo's bumped and Molly's going instead. And part of that conversation, uh, Deke is cool as a cucumber. Uh, because Ed lobs one at him and says, you know what it's like, loser, to not get to go. You got pulled, right? And Deke plays it so smooth. He goes down a little bit of the thing, and he's like, and then you can have a party for all the people who are pissed off about it, but I won't be there. He's like, you want to play that, and he's like, you don't want the flight, just say the words. And Ed's like, no, I want to go on the airplane. you know. So yeah, Deke's like reminding him, pulls that leash real quick. But yeah, to the outpost, man, this scene is so great for all the reasons. Because Molly's incredibly competent. She's incredibly smart. She's very competent. The way Molly's playing it, she the new guy, or well, not the new guy, Sedge, he asks for the A1 sauce and she hands him the 57. So good. Because and he just looks at it and he doesn't say anything, which is hilarious. And to your point, they're both like, oh yeah, you're gonna have to do this and you're gonna have to do that, and so on and yada. And she's kind of like, hey, by the way, aren't you also a new astronaut? Isn't this your first time up? And Sedge is kind of like, yeah. And then she points out to them that she's been flying longer than both of them.
Oh shit.
Which was hilarious. And that she was also she completed the Mercury 13 program. So that kind of gives her seniority, and it really snaps their belts. It puts them back in their place, and it's really great. So I appreciate that, because Molly is one of my favorites over the long term. She's just an incredibly well done character, expertly portrayed, and serves the story in ways that you don't see just yet. So I love this scene because it just builds on it, and then that plays over into the simulation, where she all of that misplaced confidence shows up, because she isn't exactly paying attention to what they're doing in the simulation. But here, she is playing herself to be more than the boys, which she is, but she hasn't shown herself yet. So
Would you agree that Molly is just a little bit naive in this episode? Would you agree that she's a little bit over her head with all this stuff?
I'd say maybe a little bit, not so much over her head, as she isn't yet taking it as seriously as she's
As she
capable
should.
of. Yeah.
Right.
Because, and I don't know where that kind of come from. And maybe it's kind of her dissociation so that she doesn't feel the feelings for losing her friend. Because that's a lot of Molly right there, is not digging in on her feelings. And so
Right.
that's an interesting point with that. But yeah, it's when they play her kind of her naivete, it isn't because she doesn't know that the job is dangerous, but she let her confidence rather than her experience. Right? She relied on confidence over experience she doesn't have yet. To the point, like you mentioned earlier, that Ed's like, well, I'll just do it myself.
Right. No, yeah, and I also, I also think that Molly, like we've learned in previous episodes, Molly has a chip on her shoulder. Molly believes that the whole world is against her.
Yeah.
So not only is she dealing with the death of her friend Patty,
Mhm.
but she's dealing with believing that that she has this belief that everybody around her wants her to fail. And even on media day, as they're taking the photos, the fucking media guy says, "I wish we had a more congenial astronaut." She's sitting there
Yeah,
being asked. This is a
like
really funny scene.
I can hear you.
Yeah. She's physically sitting there as the media guy is basically insulting her to her face. I'm like,
Mhm.
really, dude? Come on,
It's
come on with it.
and it's slight too. And I watched this episode twice getting ready for today. I watched it once through to kind of
Watch
watch
it.
it,
Yeah.
and then I watched it through again to mark notes for
No,
that reel.
discuss-
And
right.
so I got a lot of it today. And he says something. He goes, "Oh, Nixon prefers long hair, but oh, that ship has sailed." Because
Oh,
Molly's a little older,
yeah.
and not conventionally attractive uh, as the character is portrayed.
Yeah.
And he kind of mentions like, "Oh, smile," and he's like, "Oh no, don't smile," and
No,
she's right
no.
there, you know.
Yeah, she's right there.
And but what I like is how that fades into her, or was it before that where she's correcting the motto of the mission and changing her patch. She
Uh,
changes it to a raven, and then she changes any of the references to men only pronouns to our and ours, which was
uh,
really, really good.
yeah. No. I believe that's a little bit after that, but
Is it?
that's a really good scene that was in our opening video package, guys. Again, pick it up by Dan. Great stuff. Um, yeah, but I found that scene to be so cool when she took the sign and she was like
Yeah.
correcting it and
Oh, it was
scribbling it.
nice. It's a good patch too. Good looking
Yeah,
patch.
just real quick. Do you have any thoughts on Wayne? Because I love Wayne.
I've loved
Nobody,
Wayne as a character through this whole
nobody,
show.
nobody gives Wayne a lot of love. At least for me. So, do you have any thoughts on Wayne?
Yeah, I think Wayne is an interesting character because obviously he's there to provide the counter to what it's like to be the astronaut wife. He's the astronaut husband. And as yeah, because Gordo is an astronaut husband, but also an astronaut. So, and we know Ellen is unattached at the moment, and Danielle's husband is serving in Vietnam and about to come home. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Wayne makes an interesting dynamic. He's very chill. And I love who Molly is when she's with him because she can be herself. She's much more
Softer.
genteel. Yeah, she's calmed. Not that she's ever overwhelmed, but she is in a calm place for herself. And Wayne is just great because he's so unassuming. And the way he was introduced to Margot, classic because the look on her face says everything that everyone would want to think, realizing that someone like Molly might have a husband. Because being honest, in the subversive storytelling elements, um, Ellen would not be considered, would not be assumed to be gay, whereas Molly fits the stereotype of a gay woman. So they play against that to Margot's surprise, but Wayne is so chill, and I can't remember if where we end up with Wayne down the road, but. Uh, his his use in this episode and I believe it's our first introduction to him
Yes.
is fantastic. So yeah, I just and then he's so like adorable at the end when the rocket's going off and he's there with Karen and he grabs her hand. It's so
Yeah.
cute.
Wayne and Karen, they actually strike up a little bit of a relationship
Yeah, they end up being
further
yeah,
down the road. Like Dan said, Wayne is a counter to Molly's astronaut. And the cool thing about Wayne is that he's just so chill. He's this typical guy of that era who does that thing. I think that he's just a really, really nice character that becomes a little bit more critical as the series goes on. But you mentioned it just a second ago. You talked about Danielle for just a second that her husband is coming back from Vietnam because, as we know in this episode, in this timeline, Vietnam was successfully over with. by this point. Her husband is coming back from Vietnam, and it's a really really short scene, but it's Danielle talking to her husband over a phone, and it's just a really really tiny scene, but I feel that scene gives you a lot about their relationship without giving you anything, because he doesn't show up until season 2, right?
I can't remember when he
I
finally
can't
gets home.
I can't remember
Um,
that.
and he I do know, and not to spoil too much ahead, but he
Yeah.
struggles, and
Oh
that's
yes, he does.
where this scene, like you said, it isn't very long. It is them on the telephone, and what I think this scene tells in the visual of it as the scene plays out is their relationship is uh, um, the biggest problem with it is communication, right? And so they're literally unable to communicate because of the kind of thing you're trying to get to Da Nang in Vietnam, and
Yeah.
so in 1970, and so the connection is very poor. It stutters, drops in and out, and so that makes it difficult for them to connect after having been, and as she's now, the timing being that he's going to be coming home as she's likely to be, going on a mission. And so they're going to not cross paths, and it's just going to kind of disrupt further. And that is, that disruption in communication, which is, it's a very telling part. And, Danielle's face says so much. She's just happy to have a connection, even if it's a very little. He's more frustrated on the other end, uh, as we can hear. But yeah, the telephone plays a very important role throughout this entire episode.
Yeah, it does.
So many parts of this story are told through the telephone. It's really kind of interesting.
Speaking of the telephone, my favorite scene in the whole episode, and this made me so happy. Tracy is at the cave. She's doing. Oh, I loved it, and Dan knows what it is.
Oh man.
Tracy, yeah, it's so good. Tracy is at the cape doing preparing for the launch. It's launch day. And Gordo is back at their house freaking out cuz cuz he called Tracy last night and she wasn't there. So Gordo was like, when are you coming home? Where are you? What are you doing? And Tracy's like, I don't know. You know how this works. We're here. It's launch day, and what do you want me to tell you? Did anything happen to the kids? And he's like, no. But what if something did? And he's like, I'm sure you can handle it. And there's a point when Gordo says, I think you should be more focused on your responsibilities as a mother. And that's the moment where Tracy's like, "You mother," and she runs to the bathroom. And as a way to get back at him, she flushes the toilet.
Oh yeah, yeah. Clap back to the first episode,
Clap back.
and he's like, whoa, 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 and
What
she's
was
like,
that? Oh,
and he kind of realizes he swallows that pretty hard. But yeah, no, that is such a good scene and well played by Tracy.
yeah. It's such a good scene. And the moment after Tracy hangs up the phone, but when she opens the hotel door, she takes a moment. She's like, oh, and she just steps out. It's just really, really great. The other thing that I like about this episode is that I mentioned Gordo's drinking problem, but there's another scene that comes before the one that we just talked about where Gordo comes home and there's all these flower arrangements around the house celebrating the fact that Tracy just became a pilot. And this is shortly after Gordo found out that he's being replaced on 15 by Molly. And he just comes home drunk off his ass, not realizing that they're about to have a dinner party to celebrate Tracy becoming an astronaut. And I really love the moment when Tracy realizes he's drunk. And I love it after Gordo tells her why he's drunk. She does feel a thing of sympathy for him. But again, why does that guy have to drink so much? I mean, good God, man. Like really? Look, I
Oh,
understand.
that's how
Yeah.
they dealt with stuff back
Yeah,
then.
yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, look, I understand that you've had a bad day. You just lost your chance to go to the moon, but like Dan just said, that's how they deal with stuff back then. They drink. I just wish that Gordo would let that demon go, because I believe it's in this I believe it's in this season or next season. Ed brings up Gordo's drinking problem at a point. When Gordo goes a little nuts for
Oh
something.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I just like I don't yeah, like I mean I love Gordo, but when he's drinking and when he's like that, I'm not digging him too much. Um the other thing that I would like to focus on just as we start to wrap up here. There are wonderful scenes in this episode with Karen and and Ed. One of my favorite scenes, it's really quick, it's really funny, is them getting ready for bed. And Ed trying to justify the fact that he can't do anything about Molly being on his crew, and and Karen, as Dan pointed out in the past, is so against it. She sounds like she wants to take Ed and throw him across the room. But it's just a really funny scene, the dynamic, and seeing Ed try to tell Karen that, look, I can't do anything about it. I'm stuck. She's on the crew, and now I'm going to have to deal with it. But I love that because, again, like I said in previous episodes, I thought it was a problem that Karen had with women actually being astronauts, but that wasn't it.
No, that's not
So,
it.
so the way that Karen acts with all this stuff is just fascinating because I love it how it shows that she's in Ed's corner kind of more than he is.
Right. Yeah.
Because again, throughout the scene, Ed is backing up the whole entire time. He like he does not know what to say. So I do like the way that Joel Kinnaman plays it of like what do you want me to say? What the hell do you want me to do?
Right. There's
Like
nothing he can do.
I can't fucking pull off the flight. So what do you want me to do?
It's
I
either
can't do that.
this or I don't go.
There's another small scene that I would like to get your opinion on, and this happens on earlier in the episode. So when all the bigwigs are in one of the conference rooms, and this is a scene where Margot gets called Werner's girl,
Hmm.
they discover that there's these sort of tubule things on the moon that could be used as bases,
Hmm.
and we discovered that has probably the Russians sent somebody to the moon and put somebody in those tubules, but they are now dead.
Hmm.
So when you saw this episode for the first time or today, what were you thinking? What were you thinking about that scene when the Russians yet again beat us to something on the moon? What were your thoughts?
That was another part where they were going to um, kind of got frustrated about how often they're shifting gears. Are we putting a woman on the moon, or are we building the lunar base, or what? What is the deal? And what the driving factor of this is that apparently there's a orbiter of ours around the moon that like a spy satellite around the moon, and it's detected what seems to be a crash of Russian lunar land attempt. And that mission seemed to be carrying tubes that could be used as habitation. And so, the assumption is they're building a lunar base there, and yet again going to beat America to something significant. So that kind of sets the impetus for where this season is going to go. That's the first little seed that's planted about where we ultimately wind up down by episode 10. So this was a great scene because it's kind of in there, and if you're not really paying attention, it comes and goes. But if you've like we have seen the show, or if you're paying attention, there's a lot going on in just a short little bit here. So
Yeah, I listen. I understand that NASA's tired of getting kicked in the teeth by the Russians with the moon and everything. I understand that, but look, at this point, when I was watching this series for the first time, and today at this point, I was like, guys, like, I understand that you want to beat the Russians, but here's an idea: instead of going to the moon, that's the thought. Instead of going to the moon, why don't you go to someplace further? like
Right.
not the moon. Why don't like if you really want to kick the Russians into which they want to do, why don't they go to Mars? But
Go to Mars from here instead.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, but that's a long way off, and that's extremely difficult.
Yeah. It's
Um,
absolutely a lot more to get there than it is to get to the moon.
yeah. So I look. The thing I like about the storytelling in the show is the way that the writers ratchet up the tension episode by episode, and I really like the way that the sort of specter of the president's, wishes and his mandate to beat the Russians really kind of puts a cramp in the style of the way that Deke and the um the way that Deke wants to run NASA
Hmm.
along with Gene Kranz. Like it's so interesting yet so funny to watch them try and deal with politics and
Yeah, they don't care about the politics.
yeah,
They
they
just
don't give
want
a
to do the
shit.
job.
Yeah. They don't. I couldn't have put it another way. You don't give a shit about the politics, but it's so fun to watch them trying to navigate. It's fun to watch them try and navigate something that they don't give a shit about.
Right.
But I would like just to focus on two quick scenes between one having to do with the latest father, because as we know, he works at NASA.
Yeah.
And this is after the women astronauts had been announced,
Hmm.
and he picks up a paper off the floor. And later on, he goes home and he gives it to Aleda, and we find out that Aleda is now on the right track, and she has a bedroom full of NASA classified documents posted on her wall like that.
Right.
Um, which is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like it's just so cool. And the next scene, or the next scene that I would like to focus on is Aleda and her father going to a bus station, and we find out that her father has bought Aleda a ticket to go see the launch of 15 in
Hmm.
Houston with everybody else.
Yeah.
I really like that because there's something so poetic about watching a character that we're going to come to know and love as a kid, watching one of her astronauts that she's going to work with later on go up into space for the first time. There's something so like poetic about that, and the fact that she's there with everybody else that she's going to interact with in the future, but at this point they don't know who the hell she is. But
Right.
it's just it's great. So, do you have anything to say about those scenes?
So I thought it was a really nice touch. Her dad being a custodian at the Manned Space Flight Center there in Houston. The scrap he finds is a copy of the speech
Yeah,
that
Dean.
Deke
At least
gave as he
sorry.
yeah, as he opened up or he promoted the astronauts. And so that's pretty significant, and he brings it home and she pins it up on her wall along with all the other stuff on her vision board, I guess it is. And
Vision board.
I can empathize and reminisce about a bus ride to watch a rocket launch, because that's what I got to do. That a much shorter trip it was from Disney World to the Cape to see the final shuttle Atlantis launch. And so I've stood very, where they were trying to say Aleda was standing. I've stood there and watched a rocket launch, and it's great. So getting to relive that through her, and then, see that excitement on her face. But even the care and the tenderness with which her father's trying to make sure, okay, you don't get off till the last stop, and when you come back, you don't get off till the last stop, because she's probably 12, 13 years old. She's not very very old, and they went through a lot for her to get here. And but yeah, I think, and like you said, these are she kind of weaves her way through folks that she may interact with quite a lot in the future. Most of those folks are over conducting the launch, but it is such an exciting moment, I think, because like you said, up to this point, um, she has been kind of this listless person, and now she seems to have that direction. This incredibly talented, gifted young lady, mathematically, etc., has now kind of seen what's going to take her to her future. It's really endearing way to connect those two pieces together.
Yeah, it's almost like she has a purpose now.
Yeah, for sure. And well, and knowing too, and the significance, and it's not stated, but obviously, part of that significance, and it's not stated outright, but the fact that that letter is what's put on the wall, and that he got her to the rocket launch of the first American woman going into space.
Mhm.
So all that ties really well together. It's a fantastic, empowering moment.
There's a really quick, funny moment when Molly's putting on the spacesuit for the first time with Ed in the capsule, and it's a dry run. You know what I'm gonna say, right? And and the folks back at NASA are sort of sitting there getting ready to, watching everything, and one that goes, "Wait a minute, we have a problem." And one guy sitting there goes, "What are you talking about? There's no problem." And he goes, well, the EV suit is specifically made for man parts. What are we gonna do?" And Larry is there, and he has the stupidest suggestion ever. He goes, "She'll wear a diaper." I'm like, "Are you serious, Larry?
No.
No,
Yeah,
are you kidding
that's
me?
like 6 days. No, thank you. No, thank you.
No." But to his credit, Ed, because he's a mission commander, says to the NASA guys, "You are rocket scientists. Figure it out."
Right,
So
yeah, yeah.
I really love that NASA didn't really anticipate women being astronauts. So
Oh,
because
yeah.
they didn't do that, so because they had no foresight of that actually happening one day, they built the suits specifically with men in mind.
Yeah.
It's just really, really great. And also going to launch day, seeing Molly put on her official uniform and walk down that tunnel that we've seen in astronaut movies
So
forever.
many
We saw it.
times.
Yeah, we saw it. We saw it in Apollo. We saw it in The Right Stuff. We saw it in First Man. It's a famous tunnel. We see it everywhere. For anybody who likes space like we do. I really love it. I really love it when they're walking down the hallway. There are people on both sides,
Mhm,
and on one side there's a group full of women, and Ed is sort of leading the group, right? But
mhm.
Ed notices what's happening, and he takes a step back, and he lets Molly lead frontwards.
Yep.
I really, really love that moment. And when she gets into when they're when they're being faceted into the rocket, I love watching scenes of astronauts getting
Oh, just
faceted into the
strapped
rocket.
in? Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'm like, do you guys understand how dangerous this is? And if those straps go bye bye, you guys are gonna kill yourselves.
Yep. You don't wanna be floating loose in that.
In that thing. But I love the moment when I think it's either Ed or Molly or the other astronaut says that this is important, right? And
Yeah,
and Molly says, "I haven't done anything yet," and Ed says, "Well, you did just strap yourself to a rocket for government pay.
yeah,
That was a
exactly.
really smart."
The you strapped yourself to a rocket built by the lowest bidder joke never gets old when it comes to
Yeah,
NASA.
it's just
It is,
it's just
they made that joke in Armageddon, and the way it's
they
played
did.
here is fantastic. Because, yeah, I know I mean, the fact that you're sitting in the seat is really something.
Yeah.
At that point, what, 8 people had done it? So,
Yep.
you know,
Mhm.
uh, it's that is a great scene. Ed given space so that she could take the lead, and then all of the women at NASA being down the hallway, and then the final 3 being her fellow
For
astronauts.
astronauts.
Really well done. Just
Mhm.
really well done.
And the final shot of the episode is Molly looking out over the windows in the rocket, going, "I'm going to space."
Yeah, as they
Yeah,
transition
yeah, yeah,
right
yeah.
into right up into the actual darkness, it kind of
Yeah.
finally, I guess, lands with her what's about to happen.
Yeah. No, and like the episode ends with a really, really nice dedication of the real woman who inspired the name of the character.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
which listen, I've seen the show a couple times, but I never noticed that before. So I'm like, wow,
I didn't either. Yeah, I felt it was like I don't
I
remember
felt
that part. I
dumb.
felt a little kind of
So I'm
guilty
like,
if
no,
it
but
was there and I didn't notice before.
No, but you know what? I felt dumb because I've never noticed that before.
But yeah, this was a really good episode.
Yeah, it was.
Big
Yeah,
fun.
it was really. It was really fun. So before we say goodbye, do you want to talk about the shirt that we have up for sale, Dan?
Oh yeah, went and designed us a shirt for all of our fans, and so you can follow through my link tree that's highlighted there under my name, and on there is a link to my Cotton Bureau store, and there is our For All Mankind shirt. It's a take on the NASA meatball logo with the initialism FAM of fam for all mankind. So you can help out the fam and go check out the shirt. And Marcelo and I split the proceeds evenly. So if you buy a lot of them, we can both get some lunch.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, check that out. And to that, you can see all the other things and places that I am if you check out that link tree. So it's multifunctional.
Awesome. And Dan's link tree, along with all my links and stuff, will be listed in the description under show notes. So if you guys go down there, everything will be down there. But guys, if you want to catch me and my goings on in the interwebs, you can just find me at Twitter. I'm at CreekFanatic88, and there you can also find my Linktree account that shows all my wonderful things that I'm a part of, including this wonderful show that we're doing here.
Come have fun with us.
Yes, come have fun with us. But until next time, guys, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you when I see you.
So much happened here, and so much is about to.